The attitude that makes everyone test you is not weakness in the obvious sense. It is not kindness. It is not patience. It is not even humility. It is the quiet habit of showing people that you are willing to betray yourself just to keep the peace. The moment people feel that you are afraid of discomfort, afraid of disapproval, afraid of being misunderstood, they begin to test how far they can go with you. Not always because they are cruel, but because human nature is always watching for limits. And when you do not protect your own limits, the world becomes curious. It starts pressing. It starts pulling. It starts asking, without words, how much of yourself you are willing to give away just to be accepted. That is the hard truth many people avoid because it hurts. You can have a good heart and still invite disrespect. You can be generous and still teach people to take from you without guilt. You can be loving and still create a pattern where others only value you when you are useful, available, agreeable, and easy to bend. This is why so many people feel exhausted in their relationships, frustrated in their work, and strangely invisible in rooms where they have done everything to be liked. They believe that being soft will protect them. They believe that explaining themselves more will make people understand. They believe that proving their good intentions will finally make others treat them right. But life keeps teaching the same brutal lesson. When you do not stand firmly inside yourself, people do not suddenly become more careful with you. They become more comfortable crossing your line. And maybe that is what has been hurting you without you fully naming it. Not the conflict. Not the rejection. Not even the disrespect itself. But the deep disappointment of realizing that the more you try to make everything smooth for everyone else, the less solid you begin to feel inside. Because every time you silence your own truth to avoid tension, a part of you notices. Every time you say yes when your spirit is screaming no, a part of you remembers. Every time you laugh off what offended you, excuse what wounded you, or minimize what drained you, you may look calm on the outside, but inwardly something starts breaking. Not loudly. Quietly. And that quiet breaking is dangerous, because it teaches your mind that your own feelings are negotiable. This is where Stoic wisdom becomes uncomfortable, but freeing. The Stoics did not teach emotional numbness. They taught self-command. They taught that peace does not come from controlling other people's behavior, but from becoming so rooted in your own principles that the behavior of others no longer decides your worth. Marcus Aurelius understood something many people still resist today. Your mind becomes weak when it is always waiting for the world to treat you fairly before you give yourself permission to be steady. If your peace depends on everybody respecting your boundaries without you ever clearly living them, you will remain frustrated for a very long time. Because people do not learn your value by listening to your private thoughts. They learn it by watching your repeated behavior. They learn it when you stop over-explaining. They learn it when your no does not tremble. They learn it when you are no longer available for every demand, every emotional pull, every manipulative silence, every invitation to abandon yourself for the comfort of others. They learn it when your kindness is no longer confused with surrender. And that is where many people get lost. They think the answer is becoming cold, becoming distant, becoming harsh. But that is not strength. That is wounded armor. Real strength is quieter than that. Real strength does not need to perform power. It simply stops apologizing for having standards. It stops begging to be understood by people who benefit from misunderstanding you. It stops making a speech every time it chooses self-respect. And that change is powerful because it confuses people who were used to your old posture. The people who tested you were often not reacting to your words. They were reacting to your uncertainty. They were reacting to the energy of someone who kept saying, "Please don't be upset with me for protecting myself." The world feels that energy immediately. If you walk through life trying to be harmless at all costs, people will often treat you like someone they can shape. If you keep presenting yourself as endlessly flexible, endlessly tolerant, endlessly understanding, many will not call you noble. They will call you convenient. And convenience is rarely respected for long. It is consumed. That is why one of the most dangerous attitudes in life is the need to be seen as good by everyone. Not good in the moral sense. Good in the emotional sense. Easy, pleasant, never difficult, never firm, never inconvenient. The person who needs to preserve that image becomes predictable. And once you are predictable in that way, people start testing your limits because they already believe they know the outcome. They assume you will stay quiet. They assume you will forgive too fast. They assume you will keep giving one more chance, one more explanation, one more piece of your energy. Not because they studied philosophy, not because they consciously planned it, but because repeated behavior trains expectation. This is why Seneca's wisdom still feels so alive. Suffering often grows when we fear discomfort more than we fear self-betrayal. Think about that. Many people are not destroyed by one great tragedy. They are slowly weakened by daily compromise against themselves, by the habit of swallowing what should be spoken, by the reflex of shrinking to make others feel large, by the instinct to earn peace through compliance instead of building peace through character. And the saddest part is that this attitude usually comes from pain, not pride. It often begins in the sincere desire to be loved, to be chosen, to avoid loss, to avoid conflict, to avoid being seen as difficult. It comes from wanting harmony. It comes from wanting safety. But if your version of safety requires constant self-erasure, then it is not safety. It is slow, emotional abandonment. If this reflection is hitting something real inside you, take a moment to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Sometimes the messages we need most are the ones that remind us to come back to ourselves, and that simple support helps this reach someone else who may be silently losing themselves too. The deeper problem is not that others test you. People will always test what matters. Life itself tests everything. The deeper problem is when you respond to every test by doubting your own right to stand firm. That is the trap. You start thinking the issue is how to make people stop pushing. But often the real transformation begins when you stop collapsing. Because the strongest signal you can send is not anger. It is consistency, not loudness. Clarity, not threats. Alignment. Epictetus taught that we suffer when we confuse what belongs to us with what does not. Other people's opinions do not belong to you. Their moods do not belong to you. Their attempts to pressure, guilt, charm, provoke, or manipulate do not belong to you. What belongs to you is your judgment, your response, your standard, your posture, your decision about what you will and will not participate in. And once you understand that, something begins to shift inside you. You stop treating every moment of tension as an emergency. You stop rushing to fix discomfort that was never yours to carry. You stop seeing boundaries as cruelty. You start seeing them as truth in action. Because the truth is, people test the person who is still undecided about themselves. They test the one who speaks with hesitation. They test the one who keeps reopening closed doors. They test the one who confuses empathy with permission. They test the one who wants peace so badly that they will pay for it with their dignity. So avoid this attitude, the attitude of emotional over-negotiation. The attitude of constantly trying to make your truth easier for everyone else to accept. The attitude of shrinking your standards so nobody calls you difficult. The attitude of trying to earn respect through endless understanding while offering none to your own inner life. You do not need to become rigid. You do not need to become selfish. You do not need to become unfeeling. But you do need to become internally decided. Because the moment your spirit knows, without apology, what it stands for, people begin to feel that difference. Some will respect it. Some will resist it. Some will disappear the moment access becomes harder. Let them. That, too, is information. That, too, is clarity. That, too, is peace beginning to take shape. And maybe that is the first truth you need to sit with today. Not everyone who tests you is stronger than you. Many are simply reacting to the parts of you that still ask permission to exist. What makes this even harder to accept is that, for a long time, this attitude can look like maturity. You stay calm when something bothers you. You let things go. You avoid making everything a problem. You tell yourself you are being wise, patient, evolved. But there is a quiet line between peace and passivity, and many people do not notice when they have crossed it. Peace comes from strength. Passivity comes from fear. Peace says, I know who I am, so I do not need to react to everything. Passivity says, I am afraid of what will happen if I finally react to something. From the outside, those two things can look similar. Inside, they feel completely different. And that difference matters, because your inner motive shapes your whole life. When you remain silent from strength, your silence has dignity. When you remain silent from fear, your silence has tension. Your body feels it. Your mind feels it. Your sleep feels it. You carry conversations long after they end. You replay the moment in your head. You imagine what you should have said. You think of the boundary too late. You create entire speeches in private because you were too afraid to speak one honest sentence in real time. That is not peace. That is delayed suffering. This is where many people begin to understand the real cost of being too available, too agreeable, too easy to pressure. The cost is not only that others take more from you. The cost is that you stop trusting yourself. And once self-trust starts fading, everything becomes heavier. Small decisions become confusing. Simple situations become emotionally loaded. You start reading too much into people's tone, their silence, their change in energy, because deep down you are no longer standing on something solid within yourself. When you keep abandoning your own instinct, you become dependent on external reactions to tell you whether you did the right thing. And that is exhausting. The Stoic path was never about becoming untouched by life. It was about becoming anchored in something deeper than life's chaos. A person without that anchor becomes easy to shake. A delayed reply shakes them. A cold tone shakes them. Disapproval shakes them. Rejection shakes them. Being misunderstood shakes them. Not because these things are pleasant, but because they have placed too much power in what is outside their control. And once you do that, everyone becomes a potential ruler of your emotional state. That is why people test you most when they sense that your stability depends on their approval. Because then they do not even need force. A little distance can move you. A little guilt can move you. A little disappointment can move you. A little pressure can move you. And once your center becomes movable, life becomes negotiation after negotiation, with almost no rest inside. But the moment you begin to reclaim your center, everything changes in a quiet way first. Not dramatic. Not loud. Quiet. You stop rushing to defend yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop feeling guilty every time you disappoint someone with a healthy boundary. You stop treating every request as a moral obligation. You stop explaining your no as if it were a crime scene that needs evidence. You begin to realize that many of the people who called you good were only comfortable because you made access to yourself effortless. That realization can be painful, but it is also liberating. Because now you begin to see that being tested is often the price of becoming clear. The moment you stop bending automatically, some people will push harder. Not because you are wrong, but because your old behavior trained them to expect easy entry. When that entry changes, resistance appears. This is where many people panic and return to their old posture. They mistake resistance for proof that the boundary was wrong. But often resistance is simply proof that the boundary is new. Read that again in your heart. Resistance does not always mean you are doing the wrong thing. Sometimes it means you are finally doing the thing that should have been done a long time ago. This is one of the most difficult stages of growth. The first time you choose yourself in a cleaner, stronger way, you may not feel powerful. You may feel guilty. You may feel rude. You may feel cold. You may feel selfish. Why? Because you are used to measuring goodness by how comfortable everyone else feels around you. So when you stop overgiving, it can feel like you are becoming worse, when in reality you are simply becoming more honest. And honesty has a strange effect. It often feels harsh to people who benefited from your confusion. Marcus Aurelius constantly returned to the idea that the soul must remain in command of itself. Not because control makes life perfect, but because without inner command, life drags you from reaction to reaction. One moment you are motivated. The next moment someone's opinion weakens you. One moment you know your value. The next moment, one cold interaction makes you question everything. One moment you are calm. The next moment you are back in emotional servitude, trying to repair an atmosphere that was never your responsibility to carry. That is not freedom. Freedom begins when you stop asking every difficult moment, "How do I make this go away?" and start asking, "Who do I become inside this moment?" That question changes everything. Because now your energy is not focused on controlling the outer scene. It is focused on preserving inner order. You stop living like a hostage to reactions. You stop making temporary discomfort into permanent self-betrayal. And that is where dignity returns. Not the fake dignity of ego. Not the loud dignity of pride. The quiet dignity of a person who no longer needs to shrink to stay loved. There is a powerful shift that happens when you understand this. Being tested is not always a sign that people do not value you. Sometimes it is simply a sign that life is asking whether you value yourself enough to remain consistent. That question appears everywhere. In how you answer disrespect. In how quickly you abandon your standard when loneliness appears. In how easily you reopen doors that cost you peace. In how often you confuse being needed with being respected. In how much nonsense you tolerate because you are afraid that choosing yourself will leave you alone. But being alone for a season is often less damaging than being surrounded while disconnected from yourself. That sentence is hard for many people because they have spent years fearing isolation more than misalignment. They stay in draining patterns, not because those patterns are good, but because uncertainty feels unbearable. Yet some of the deepest suffering in life comes from staying where your spirit keeps shrinking. A stoic mind understands that discomfort is not always danger. Sometimes discomfort is the doorway to self-respect. And self-respect is not built in one grand moment. It is built in small, repeated acts of internal loyalty. In not answering what should not be entertained. In not accepting what keeps violating your peace. In not chasing explanations from those who enjoy keeping you confused. In not volunteering your energy where there is no reciprocity, no sincerity, no care. These may look like small choices, but they shape your inner architecture. They tell your nervous system, your mind, your spirit, "I am no longer available for everything." That sentence alone can change a life. Because the person who is available for everything is eventually claimed by anything. If this reflection is opening your eyes, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. There are moments in life when one honest truth can save you years of confusion, and maybe this is one of those moments for you today. It is also worth asking yourself something deeper. Why did this attitude begin in the first place? Why do so many people become so easy to test? Usually because at some point they learned that love had to be maintained through performance. Through being pleasant. Through being useful. Through not being difficult. Through reading the room and adjusting themselves before anyone else had to adjust. That pattern can follow someone for years. It can enter friendships, relationships, work, family, even spirituality. A person starts believing that goodness means self-reduction. That kindness means self-neglect. That patience means endless tolerance. But none of that is wisdom. It is confusion wearing the clothes of virtue. Real virtue is cleaner than that. Virtue says, I can be kind without becoming weak. I can be calm without becoming passive. I can be loving without becoming easy to use. I can be generous without becoming empty. I can forgive without reopening the door to what destroys my peace. That is strength. Quiet, measured, stable strength. And the beautiful thing is that you do not need everybody to agree with this new version of you. You only need enough inner honesty to stop betraying it. That is the beginning of real peace. Not universal approval. Not perfect relationships. Not a world where nobody ever tests you again. That world does not exist. People will still test. Life will still pressure. Opinions will still move around you. But once your foundation changes, the tests no longer define you. They reveal you. They reveal whether you have learned to stay with yourself. So the next time someone pushes a little too far, the question is not, how do I keep them happy without losing myself? The deeper question is, can I remain truthful without becoming reactive? That is stoic strength. That is emotional maturity. That is the beginning of no longer living at the mercy of every outside force. And maybe the clearest truth in all of this is simple. The attitude that makes people test you is not kindness, softness, or patience by themselves. It is the habit of showing that your boundaries disappear the moment pressure enters the room. End that habit, and your life begins to change from the inside out. If this part touched something real in you, write one word in the comments: steadiness. Sometimes one word is enough to remind your mind what it is trying to become. There comes a moment in a person's life when they get tired in a very specific way. Not physically. Not even emotionally in the usual sense. It is a deeper exhaustion. The exhaustion of realizing that too much of their life has been spent managing the reactions of others instead of mastering the condition of their own mind. That kind of tiredness changes you. It makes you look back at old conversations, old relationships, old versions of yourself, and see something with painful clarity. You were not always being tested because others were powerful. Sometimes you were being tested because you kept presenting your peace as something negotiable. And that realization can sting. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. You begin to notice how many times you abandoned clarity for comfort. How many times you explained yourself to people who had already decided not to understand. How many times you tolerated what disturbed your soul because you thought endurance alone was wisdom. But endurance is only noble when it serves truth. When it serves fear, it becomes self-neglect with a disciplined face. That is why this change must become deeper than behavior. Cannot just be a new tone of voice. A new attitude. A few stronger words. It has to become an inner decision. A private line drawn inside yourself. A moment where you quietly say, I will no longer make myself smaller just because someone else is uncomfortable with my standards. I will no longer call it peace when I am simply afraid to lose approval. I will no longer betray my inner life just to maintain access, attention, affection, or false harmony. That decision is not loud, but it is life-changing. Because once you truly make it, you start moving differently. You stop entering every interaction with the hidden goal of being accepted. You stop performing emotional flexibility for people who have never earned that level of access. You stop seeing firmness as something negative. You begin to understand that a stable life is not built by saying yes to everything that knocks. It is built by knowing what deserves entrance and what does not. And in modern life, this matters more than ever. You are surrounded by noise, opinions, pressure, expectations, instant access, emotional demands, and invisible competition for your attention. Everyone wants something. A response. An explanation. Your time. Your energy. Your emotional labor. Your patience. Your softness. Your availability. And if you do not have an inner philosophy, you will slowly become public property. Not because people are evil, but because the world has no natural instinct to protect the mind of the person who refuses to protect it themselves. This is where Stoicism stops being an idea and becomes a way of surviving with dignity. To live well, you must stop asking life to stop testing you and start becoming someone who is not easily moved from what matters. That does not mean becoming emotionally dead. It means becoming internally ordered. It means your values become more solid than your impulses. Your principles become stronger than your fear of temporary discomfort. Your self-respect becomes more important than the approval of those who only liked the version of you that was easy to manage. And yes, this may cost you some relationships. It may change how certain people respond to you. It may expose who is connected to your heart and who is only connected to your convenience. But that exposure is not a loss of peace. It is the beginning of peace. Because peace is not keeping everyone close. Peace is no longer needing to abandon yourself to keep them there. That truth alone can free a person. Seneca understood that much of human suffering comes from living against reality. And reality is this: you will not be respected by trying to be impossible to reject. You will not find inner calm by making yourself endlessly adjustable. You will not discover your worth by handing other people the authority to define it. The calmer path is harder at first, but cleaner in the end. Know your mind. Know your values. Know your limits. Let your behavior reflect them so consistently that your life no longer sends mixed signals about what is acceptable. Because mixed signals invite repeated tests. A clear life, on the other hand, has a quiet force to it. It does not need drama. It does not need constant speeches. It does not need revenge. It simply becomes less available to confusion, less available to disrespect, less available to emotional chaos. And the beautiful thing is that this clarity protects not only your relationships with others, but your relationship with yourself. You begin to trust your own voice again. You begin to feel less fragmented, less divided, less resentful. Why? Because resentment often grows where truth is repeatedly suppressed. Once truth is allowed to breathe, resentment begins to fade. That does not mean life becomes easy. There will still be moments when you are misunderstood. Moments when standing firm feels lonely. Moments when old habits pull at you and whisper that it would be easier to just bend one more time. But in those moments, remember this: every time you remain aligned with what is true, you are rebuilding something sacred inside yourself. You are teaching your mind that peace is not found in surrendering your center. It is found in returning to it. And maybe that is the deepest shift of all. You stop seeing boundaries as walls. You start seeing them as evidence of self-respect. You stop seeing discomfort as failure. You start seeing it as part of emotional adulthood. You stop seeing other people's reactions as final judgment. You start seeing them as information, nothing more. You stop asking, "How do I stop being tested?" And you start asking, "How do I become so internally clear that the test no longer shakes me?" That question creates a different kind of human being. A steadier one. A cleaner one. A freer one. If this reflection stayed with you until this moment, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and if you want, write in the comments the one sentence you most needed to hear today. Sometimes clarity becomes stronger when we put it into words. The truth is, people will always test what appears movable. Life will always pressure what appears uncertain. But when you stop living in negotiation with your own soul, something powerful happens. The outside world may still be noisy, but it no longer enters you in the same way. You become harder to disturb, not because you are cold, but because you are anchored. Not because you control everything, but because you have finally learned what is yours to control. And what is yours to control has always been enough. Your judgment, your response, your standards, your willingness to remain loyal to what you know is right. That is where dignity lives. That is where calm grows. That is where respect begins. First from within, and then, naturally, from the world around you. So avoid the attitude of self-abandonment disguised as peace. Avoid the habit of making your truth smaller so others never have to confront themselves. Avoid the reflex of surrendering your ground the moment tension appears. Because the more you practice that habit, the more the world will keep asking to see how little of yourself you are willing to protect. But when you finally decide, quietly and completely, that your inner life is no longer open to every pressure, every guilt, every demand, every test, that is the moment your presence changes. Not through force. Not through performance. Through solidity. And maybe the real lesson was never about how to stop others from testing you. Maybe the real lesson was learning not to fail your own test. Maybe the true power in life is not being untouchable. Maybe it is being inwardly stable. Maybe it is waking up one day and realizing that you no longer need to chase respect, prove your worth, or beg for gentleness from a world that responds more honestly to strength than to self-erasure. Because in the end, the strongest peace is not the peace that comes from controlling everyone around you. It is the peace that comes from no longer needing to abandon yourself to survive them. And perhaps the deepest wisdom is this: the real victory is not in making people stop challenging you, but in becoming so clear within yourself that their challenge no longer has the power to define you.